The Texas Judicial Branch. This is one of the most interesting institutions in Texas and least understood and known. Texas has two actual high courts, two Supreme Courts, the Court of Criminal Appeals, hearing criminal matters, and the Supreme Court of Texas, dealing with civil matters. A civil matter is a dispute between two people or businesses when a plaintiff files a lawsuit, against a defendant. While a criminal matter is when a party breaks a law, the party breaking the law is a defendant, and the government or the state prosecutes the person for breaking the law, So civil is like when I'm suing you, while the criminal is when the prosecution, the district attorney has a case against you because you broke the law. So Texas judges are elected. Most of them are partisan. That means they run as either Democrats or Republicans or independents, and they serve for a given number of years, So they are the final arbiters of state law, They interpret the law, they settle disputes between different parties, So most, they listen to all types of cases, as we've said. Criminal cases, civil cases, probate cases, which deal with laws and different estates of people, family law, marriage, etc., So in Texas, we are the only state with two courts of final appeal other than Oklahoma, As I've told you. We have various trial courts with an uniform jurisdiction, means some of our courts actually overlap in what they handle, which can cause chaos. So we have local courts, We have local courts, we have county courts, and then we have state courts. So a few things about the constitutional history of the court. Steve Austin appointed Josiah H. Bell to be a justice of peace, in that the Texans wanted somebody to help them deal with their issues, But the Mexican government took over in 1822, and the governor of Cahuilla, Texas, instituted a small group to be able to that was both administrative and judicial in nature to handle disputes, So this was a little bit of a grievance in this history, and of course they would follow civil law, which is closer to Spanish legacy rather than the English law, common law system that Austin wanted to have in Texas. Now, when we looked at the constitutional history, 1836 Constitution of the Republic of Texas, we saw there was one Supreme Court, not two at the time, The Chief Justice, of course, running the Supreme Court. Then there were district judges who were chosen by members of the legislative branch, So the legislative branch of Texas, of the government of Texas, chose high offices, And then the lower courts, these are the justice of peace, the county courts, were chosen by popular vote. So different ways at the very beginning, So state legislature will choose the higher offices, while the people will vote for the lower offices. Now, in the 1876 Constitution, which was post the Radical Reconstruction Constitution that we learned about, they established another appellate court, The reason being is there was issues. Things will come straight from the district courts straight to the Supreme Court. From the district straight to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court had a lot of cases that were being appealed. Remember, or not remember, but let's do this first. Let's talk about courts and how courts function so we can get a grasp of what I'm talking about. They're trial courts. Trial courts are the courts that are actually listening to the cases. From the Justice of Peace Court at the local level, we're going towards like Judge Judy, Judge Joe Brown, Those, you're being sued for something, all the way to the district court where you're being held for crimes, So all these trial courts are handling all these cases. Now, when you've been charged and found guilty, you can appeal. So a lot of cases are moving up the line and going to the Supreme Court, right? And so this causes a lot of backlog. A lot of cases are going up. And so they needed to create another appellate court of last resort. And this is the Court of Criminal Appeals. So to reduce the amount of cases, they created another court called the Court of Criminal Appeals that would now listen to criminal cases. And so this did not solve the problem, because there were still cases coming from the district court, and they were filling up again. So to change this, they created an intermediary court in 1891. So 1876, they create the Court of Criminal Appeals. And then in 1891, they created an intermediary appellate court system, but did not get rid of the Court of Criminal Appeals. So they created, so now we had the inferior courts, then we had the district courts, and then now we had the appellate court, an intermediary appeals court, right? That could now listen to all the appeals that are coming from all these trial courts. And then they kept the Court of Criminal Appeals and kept the Supreme Court. So Texas ended up with a bifurcated high court with two Supreme Courts, an appellate court in between, and a whole bunch of trial courts. Okay? And that became the major interesting, and here we have the district court, we have the county courts, and we have the lower courts. All right? And so we're going to be looking at this major thing that came about through constitutional history by 1891. So, Article 5, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution. Judicial power is vested in the courts. There is one Supreme Court. There is one Court of Criminal Appeals. There is the Court of Appeals. There are the district courts. There are the county courts, the commissioners' courts, and the courts of justice of peace. And other courts may be created as provided by law through the legislative branch. And so this is the structure of the Texas court system. Let me actually improve down here. So we have the district court. We have the county courts here. And then we have the municipal courts. These are cities, right? Towns and cities. We have the municipal court, but we also have another lower court, which is the Justice of Peace Court, which is the lowest part of the county court system. Municipal courts, you can think of like the courts that issue you your traffic tickets, right, in a city when you break the law, right? So all these courts make up the Texas. So there's overlapping. Now, these down here are trial courts. As I said, a trial court is where the case is held. They're also called courts of original jurisdiction. That means each one of these courts is where cases are supposed to start. They have the jurisdictional power over a particular case area. So for example, if maybe a case doesn't go over $200, and you're suing somebody, you only are allowed maybe to go to the Justice of Peace Court, okay? And so there are certain cases that that each one of these trial courts handles a case based on its nature. If you're being tried for the death penalty, you go to the district court, right? Every county has at least one district court. So district courts are housed within counties, right? And so this, right? So in a county, right? Like let's say Collin County, you'll have a district court, you'll have the county courts, and you'll have inferior courts with the justice of peace, and you'll have cities within counties which have municipal courts. And all of these are trial courts where cases are being held, where you can either have a judge and a plaintiff and a defendant, or you can have a major criminal case where now you have a judiciary, a judge, a defendant, and a prosecution. Now, all these cases, right, they can move through the process. And so when you're being charged, you've been found guilty of a crime, you can appeal in the United States. And therefore, you go to the appellate court level, and these are now bench judgeships. These judges, they're not holding trials. They're not holding new cases. They're just reviewing the merits, the technicalities, and the constitutional questions that arise from different cases. They're trying to see, was the case handled properly? Were there any technical issues that arose? Were there any constitutional issues that arose? So that is what the appellate courts are doing, and they can either take your case and review it and say, well, your case was decided properly, or they can review your case and basically say your case was mishandled, which they can completely throw away the case, in which you're free, or they may be able to say something was not managed properly and therefore a new trial needs to begin. Finally, cases can either go to the Supreme Court or Court of Criminal Appeals. That is the final courts, right? This is the highest courts, the final courts of appeal or arbitration in Texas. Only one case can go directly to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and that is a death penalty case where somebody's been found guilty. They can appeal to the Court of Criminal Appeals for relief. So with all that being said, now you can understand when I talk about the Constitution saying there's the establishment of these two courts, this court, district courts, county courts, justice of peace courts, and any other courts as deemed necessary, as there's more complexity in cases as people increase in Texas. All right? And so as you can see, the Texas court system is quite complex. There's overlapping jurisdiction between some municipal courts and justice of peace courts in terms of they can listen sometimes to similar cases or similar issues. There might be overlap between the highest county courts and district courts when handling certain civil matters, like issues that deal with being large amounts of money. And so those overlapping jurisdictions make it quite difficult to know which court is supposed to handle what in Texas. And so it's quite complex trying to navigate the Texas court system. And of course, having two Supreme Courts on top of that makes the complexity even increase even more. All right. So the Texas judicial system has been called one of the most complex in the United States, if not the world. The state has three levels: the trial courts, made up of the district, the county, and the inferior courts that have been mentioned, right? And of course, it has the appellate court level and the highest courts. When we look at the Texas courts, we have various appellate districts that you go to. So you start at your district, and then you go find the appellate court that is appropriate in your region, right? So these are regional appellate courts. And then after the regional appellate court, based on the appellate court, so for example, where we are, where if you've been found guilty in a district court in Collin County, you will go probably to the 5th of the 6th appellate courts, which are in the north, before you move on to the highest courts. Now we have a new appellate court, which passed in 2023, that now handles matters that deal with people who are suing offices or institutions of the government. And some people have seen this more of a political court, but that's our newest court, and it is located in Austin, Texas. It is the 15th Court of Appeal. Originally, we had only 14 regional courts, and some of those regional appellate courts had overlapping jurisdictions. So Texas has 450 state district courts, 500 county courts, 800 justice of peace courts, and 900 municipal courts. All right. And so you can see we have a lot of trial courts, a lot of cases are held. They help deal with many issues. People being sued for $500 here, somebody had a traffic ticket there. People there's disputes on inheriting property and land, marriage issues, law cases. And so there's so many cases. And so these judges serve us in these various ways. Of course, it can move up to the appellate level. We have 15 of them, as we've said. And then we have 2 high courts, a bifurcated system with the Texas Supreme Court, which has a Chief Justice and 8 associate justices who serve for 6 years. And we have a Court of Criminal Appeals, as we've said, which has a presiding judge as the head and 8 justices who serve for 6 years. And I've already explained what each one of those courts do for us. Now, just in mentioning the appellate court system and the Supreme and the high 2 courts, the 2 high courts, they're benched judgeships. All I'm saying is you are going to face, instead of one judge sitting there with a jury and etc., you have a bench judgeship. So you'll have 3 judges who will be listening to the defendant and the prosecution to determine whether the case was handled properly. And then after that, you go to the high courts, and again, it will be those 9 judges who are sitting, whether it's the 9 judges of the Court of Criminal Appeals or the Supreme Court, and they're all sitting there and they're listening to these cases, and they vote on the conclusion on whether you win or lose a case. And so that's how those appellate, the highest courts in the state, what their function is. Now, I've already talked about the district court. A district court is a trial court, highest trial court in Texas, 1 judge, a jury, and they listen to a lot of things, one of the highest jurisdictions in the United States. We're talking about from the death penalty to different criminal issues, family issues, environmental issues. So in large counties, they become more specialized. I call them county, where some judges only listen to family court cases. And then at the county level, we have so many other courts in the county court system, from the Justice of Peace Court at the bottom, the probate courts that deal with wills, the county courts, the county courts at law that assist county courts, and commissioners' courts. And let me just briefly go through them. So the constitutional county courts, which must be there, these are found in each one of our 254 counties. They handle matters, for example, civil suits of $10,000 and more. They listen to appeals from the Justice of Peace courts. They can handle Class A and B misdemeanors, right? Now, they are assisted by county courts at law in large counties. So 94 counties have county courts at law. And they listen to major suits like civil suits of $200,000 and more, and they handle issues in very high populated areas, and they may listen to some criminal matters in large counties. Then you have the probate courts that deal with matters of estate, guardianship, mental health, and etc. And then you have commissioners' courts, which are really the administration of the county, right? It's made up of the county judge and the county commissioners, and they handle different things. For example, the county commissioners court was very involved in the COVID time period in management of the county. Okay. We also have the inferior courts, which is the Justice of Peace Court, that one court that you don't need actually a law degree to run, and you just need to be 18 years of age to run for that office. And then, of course, we have the municipal courts that can issue you traffic tickets, etc. All right, so Justice of Peace courts can handle any civil matter under $200 is their exclusive jurisdiction, and they can handle suits all the way up to $10,000. They listen to class lower misdemeanors, offenses, matters that deal with juveniles, etc. Now, they serve every 4 years, and where there's a Justice of Peace court, usually there will also be, not usually, there's also a constable. So when you see constables, they usually are the officers who help in the management and the security of the justice of peace courts at the county level. And as we've said, the Class C, Class D misdemeanors are handled by these inferior courts or lower courts of the municipal and the justice of peace court, which municipal courts can also handle juvenile issues. And as we close these matters of criminal justice and the judiciary, just in passing, we can look at different law enforcement. The state level, we have the Texas Rangers, which is the nation's oldest law enforcement group, right? They handle criminal investigations. Some people have said the Texas Rangers are equal to the FBI in their investigative ability. We have the Texas State Troopers, who you're more aware of, and so they patrol our highways, and they also help communities that are isolated and do not have the ability to have police. And then you have the Texas Department of Criminal Justice that deals with many issues like corrections offices. We have different law enforcements at the state level, right? And then at the county level, we have the sheriff. The sheriff is the highest officer in the county in terms of law enforcement officer. And then we've talked about constables in different precincts who help justice of peace. They're the bailiffs for the justices. They can issue warrant and civil papers. Then you have the municipal, the city level, which we have the police officers that you see on your daily basis, which are general law enforcement officers. And so that is our judiciary and how it functions, its complexity. But we see that we have the trial courts, we have the appellate courts, we have the high courts, which are really the final courts of appeal. That's how we handle matters of justice at the state level in Texas.